As promised in the previous Stuview TV video, here are 10 iconic British sitcoms of the 1970s. Where better to start our nostalgic comic journey than with the legendary Ronnie Barker giving the performance of his career as habitual criminal Norman Stanley Fletcher in Porridge. Whenever I watch Porridge, I never see Ronnie Barker on the screen. I only ever see Fletcher, a true testament to just how good Ronnie Barker really was. Alongside Ronnie, the performances of the likes of Richard Beckinsale, Brian Wilde and, of course, the marvellous Fulton Mackay are all of the very highest order. Combine those performances with the pitch-perfect scripts by Dick Clement and Ian La Frenais, which favour dialogue, characterisation and situations over sight gags, and you have a pretty strong contender for the title of greatest British television sitcom of all time. The pilot episode of Porridge, titled Prisoner and Escort, was broadcast on the 1st of April 1973. The series proper ran from September 1974 to March 1977. A sequel, Going Straight, ran for 6 episodes in 1978, while a big screen version of Porridge was released in cinemas in July 1979. Another winner from the venerable writing duo of Dick Clement and Ian La Frenais, Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads was a 70s sequel to the 1960s hit The Likely Lads, and was one of a number of older sitcoms that the BBC brought back around this time to counter the growing popularity of comedy series on ITV. Almost 7 years since audiences had last seen them, Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads brings the story of Bob Ferris and Terry Collier up to date. Bob is preparing to marry his longtime sweetheart Thelma, while Terry has just returned home after a stint in the army. As with Porridge, the first-class scripts are brimming with marvellous dialogue, and although Bob and Terry have very different personalities, as viewers we can probably see a little bit of us in both of them. Although every episode is a little gem, No Hiding Place, broadcast in February 1973, which sees Bob and Terry desperately trying to avoid seeing the result of an England football match so that they can watch the TV highlights later that evening, is probably the one that most people remember. Such was the longevity of Last of the Summer Wine, this granddaddy of sitcoms could just as easily be included in videos looking at TV comedy of the 80s, 90s and 2000s. From the pilot episode broadcast in January 1973, who could have foreseen that this gentle, leisurely comedy series would go on a monumental 37-year run? When Last of the Summer Wine finally came to an end in 2010 after 295 episodes over 31 series, much of the TV audience couldn't remember a time when this Yorkshire-set sitcom had not been a part of their lives. I was one, being just 3 years old when the series started. The gentle theme music, stunning scenery and whimsical dialogue combined to make watching Last of the Summer Wine a very relaxing experience, even though in later years there was an increasing reliance on ever more elaborate stunts and a cast list that grew steadily to epic proportions. Of the cast, the evergreen Peter Sallis appeared in every episode as Norman Clegg, and it is he, along with Bill Owen as Compo and Brian Wilde as Foggy, that first spring to mind when thinking of Last of the Summer Wine. While Last of the Summer Wine enjoyed a record-breaking run, Dad's Army didn't fare too badly either, reaching the 80-episode mark before retiring from duty in 1977 after a 9-year stint. Even now, 47 years after that final episode, repeats of Dad's Army are often still shown on BBC Two, let alone the many repeats that are broadcast on Gold. There is something timeless about Dad's Army. Unlike some sitcoms from the 70s that were set in that particular decade, the period setting of Dad's Army ensures that the show doesn't date. Despite the awful situation of a world war, The humour is warm, and the constant theme of everyone pulling together to make the best of things in a dreadfully difficult time is comforting. Perhaps the main reason for the viewing public's continuous love affair with Dad's Army is the roster of mainly veteran acting talent that bring the lovable cast of characters to life so vividly. The Warmington-on-Sea Home Guard platoon may be bumbling, but their bravery always shines through. Steptoe and Son is another series that would be equally at home in a video dedicated to another decade, in this case the 1960s. This most revered of sitcoms was initially broadcast between 1962 and 1966. As with a number of other major comedies from this time period, Steptoe and Son was revived by the BBC in the early 70s in order to counteract the increasingly fierce competition from ITV. Indeed, the majority of the most fondly recalled episodes of Steptoe and Son come from the 70s episode catalogue. These include The Desperate Hours, which guest-starred Leonard Rossiter as an escaped convict, and the magnificent Divided We Stand, which sees Harold and Albert divide the house in two after a disagreement. The final episode of Steptoe and Son, A Perfect Christmas, was broadcast on Boxing Day 1974. In a rare case of an international remake enjoying as much success as the original, the American TV version of Steptoe and Son, called Sanford and Son, was broadcast in the US from 1972 to 1977. Before the first episode of The Good Life was broadcast in April 1975, the only one of the four main cast members who was really known by the viewing public was Richard Briers. Indeed, writers John Esmond and Bob Larby created The Good Life as a vehicle for Richard. The popularity of the series ensured that Felicity Kendall, Penelope Keith and Paul Eddington quickly became household names. Penelope Keith in particular was the breakout star of The Good Life, her performance as Margot Ledbetter elevating the character to iconic status. After all, who could ever forget the sight of the social climbing Margot, clad in bright yellow waterproofs, falling in the mud of Tom and Barbara's storm-swept garden? Tom and Barbara Good were pioneers in a way. After all, the subject of self-sufficiency is probably just as relevant today as it was in 1975. Perhaps the ultimate example of a successful, traditional studio sitcom, Are You Being Served not only ran for 70 episodes over a 13-year period, but also spawned a film version in 1977 and a spin-off TV series, Grace and Favour, which ran for 2 series between 1992 and 1993. As the humour employed in the series was of the traditional knockabout variety, Are You Being Served transferred well to other countries, with the series proving particularly popular in the USA, Canada and Australia, where it was the highest rated show of 1978. In 1979, a pilot episode was made for an American spin-off called Beans of Boston. However, the pilot was not well received and a full series never materialised. With its outrageous sight gags and ever more risque double entendres, Are You Being Served could never be mistaken for subtle. However, who cares? It was made with one intention, to make people laugh and forget their worries, something which is sadly lacking today. A hugely successful spin-off from the popular Man About the House, George and Mildred very quickly became its own show, arguably eclipsing the popularity of its predecessor. After having their previous property purchased by the council, George and Mildred Roper move in next door to the 4 Mile family in upmarket Hampton Wick. While Mildred sees the move as a step up in social standing, George bemoans the fact that he may have to get a job in order to finance their new lifestyle.
Oh,
I don't see the point in having 2 loos.
Well, supposing you both wanted to at the same time.
Well, she can wait. Anyway, I mean in here. See, and that little one hasn't got a lid on it.
George, that is a bidet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, coming useful for washing the mud off me wellies.
George, how can you be so ignorant? They don't have mud in Hampton Wick.
By the time George and Mildred began in 1976, Brian Murphy and Eutha Joyce had developed such wonderful on-screen chemistry there was little doubt that the series would be nothing but a huge success. In fact, there's a strong case to be made for George and Mildred Roper being the most famous British sitcom married couple in TV history. Rising Damp is considered by many to be the finest ITV sitcom of the 1970s. Indeed, the series won the BAFTA for Best Situation Comedy at the 1978 awards. Produced by Yorkshire Television and written by the prolific Eric Chappell, Rising Damp saw the great Leonard Rossiter create one of the most iconic characters in all of sitcom, that of seedy landlord Rupert Rigsby. Leonard was more than ably supported by a fine cast that included Richard Beckinsale, Don Warrington and Francis de la Tour. In today's society, many of the views expressed by Rigsby would be classed as politically incorrect. However, they are all true to the character of Rigsby, who is naturally suspicious of everyone he meets. It is a testament to the brilliant performance of Leonard Rossiter that we, as viewers, forgive Rigsby for his indiscretions and instead simply laugh at this startling comic creation. Before the final entry, a little note to say that as the 1970s is regarded by many as being the golden age of television comedy, narrowing down the many great sitcoms from this era to just 10 has been no easy task. Therefore, as a little bonus, here is a montage of the many other iconic British TV sitcoms that absolutely deserve to be included here. If there was just one 70s sitcom that absolutely could not be left off this list, it is Fawlty Towers. Even for those who find the humour isn't to their taste, it's hard to argue against Fawlty Towers' status as one of the greatest sitcoms ever made. Written by then husband and wife John Cleese and Connie Booth, the meticulous scripts expertly build seemingly mild situations into full-blown disasters. It's traditional farce at the highest level. John Cleese storms through proceedings like a true force of nature, ensuring Basil Fawlty will forever be regarded as one of the all-time great comedy characters. From the Germans to the hotel inspectors, and Basil the Rat to communication problems, each of the 12 episodes is a comedy masterclass. If you enjoyed today's video, a little click on the like button is always much appreciated. As always, thanks for watching, and do join me next time for more nostalgic goodness.